Okay, returning to our readings on race, this is the second reading, the one that begins on page 4. And this one relies partly on statistics, and I'll just say two things about statistics. The other articles rely on them too. But when we have a practical problem, we need practical, real, concrete data about the world, right? Like if you want there to be if you want there to be fewer shootings of unarmed black men or unarmed and innocent people in general by the police, you have to know how often it happens. Does it always happen during the day? Does it always happen when it seems like a gun was drawn? Does it happen more with inexperienced new officers? Right? You need real data and real concrete stats. Okay. Same thing if you want to tackle the rising addiction to opiate painkillers like Oxycontin, things like that. You need to know, does it happen more to older people, younger people? Is it, how do we stop it? We need to know what it is. Okay. That said, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a statistician. So all of these stats and practical facts, if you want to know if they're true or not, you need to do some fact checking yourself. Okay. I present them as things in vetted, well-established journalistic sources. All of these are good sources, okay? But I don't verify or deny any particular statistic. That's not my job. That's your econ teacher's job and your sociology teacher's job. Okay. So first point is that we need things like this when we're talking about practical problems. Second one is that I'm not going to vet or guarantee or deny the truth or falsity of any particular statistic because that's not my area of expertise. Okay, and the third one is this. Somebody needs to do that though, because there's this saying I like to say all the time. There's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. So statistics, because they're numbers and we know how true numbers are, always seem really true, right? But there's always numbers still need interpretation, and how you display the numbers, I won't say spin them, but like how you display them changes how they look. And once more, that requires you looking into it and using your own common sense. I'm not going to redisplay all these numbers to make them look differently. You just have to know that numbers aren't as neutral or arbitrary as they seem. Okay? So for instance, one of the ways that numbers are not neutral, but the way you present them makes them look bigger or smaller, basically, okay, is that you can show something like, the number of shootings of unarmed black men has gone up 350% since last year. I'm making this statistic up, by the way. But if there's only 5 people killed last year, and then what would 350 be? It'd be 15 and then like a couple more. We'll say 18. Then it seems like a giant increase, 350%, which it is, 350%. But also on the other hand, it's 13 people across the nation. Remember, these are totally made up numbers. So some people will point to the number of shootings and say it's up from last year. Some will point at it and say it's not that many people. Some will point at the numbers and go, yeah, but how many of those were, a situation like Mike Brown where the police officer felt they were in danger? How many was that the person posed no danger and the cops shot him anyhow? There's a lot of extra work that has to go on there. So part of what this second article says is that the myths, or at least what we hear, the numbers, or at least what we hear generally, are actually sort of myths. They're confusing statements about race, police violence, etc. So the confusion that this second article by MacDonald finds is that she thinks that the way police shootings of unarmed black men have been presented is as if it's a sort of epidemic sweeping our nation. That it happens mainly or basically only to unarmed black men, and that unarmed people of other races aren't being killed. That's one point. Second one is somehow that this is, police shootings are killing a whole generation of black men. Right? Again, the statistics and the details are in the article. I'll give you the general gloss. Okay? Her general gloss is what's much more dangerous to young black men than police officers is other young black men. That shootings of young black men by the police are a small fraction of what kills young black men. So if we define the police shootings as homicides, and if it is an unjustified killing of someone, then by definition it's a homicide. So I'm not saying that as a cop bashing thing, but just to keep our terminology straight. If we call shootings of unarmed people by police officers homicides, which homicide means killing, basically, okay, unjustified killing, then it is that. Terminology aside, the number of black men who are killed by cops in those kinds of situations is about 4% of black deaths from homicides. This is page 5, that the paragraph between lines 130 and 137. Okay. So if you think about it as a proportion of it, it's actually a higher proportion of whites and Hispanics are killed by cops relative than killed by non-cops, other homicides. So there's a few things going on here. Is that the proportion of deaths by police officer is actually higher for non-black Americans than it is for blacks. And the other point, this is, I think, MacDonald's bigger point, is that non-cop black males are who are really killing other black males. So here, I'll just float it, and it'll connect to both the previous article by Christoph and the question I asked you, the second question I asked you a moment ago. One possible response is that we're focusing on the wrong problem. If we read the statistics differently, we'll say black men are being killed, and that's horrible. Crime surrounding young black men is what's killing young black men. Now, some of those men are involved in that crime themselves and some aren't, but just say crime around young black men is what's killing young black men. Cops are killing young black men at a minuscule rate compared to criminal black men killing black men. Right? Now, once more, we could look at the statistics, and that's a whole other thing. Please do, it's important, but I'm not going to crunch all the numbers here for you. Right? So someone could say, we're mislabeling the problem. If Black Lives Matter, which they surely do, we need to stop the crime which is taking young black lives. The cops taking young black lives, that's bad too, but it'd be a distant priority. Another idea that's sort of floating in the background here is this. If young black men are involved in crime more than other races, and the statistics I've seen do support that, then an idea floating in the background here, and MacDonald doesn't quite say it because it doesn't sound great to say, but is basically that people are bringing violence on themselves. If they're engaging in crime and in gangs and things like that, and then there's a gang feud where one guy is mad at the other guy, and then he kills him, and they're in opposed gangs, so then there's, it's that sort of Hatfield and McCoy kind of thing. Then there's a tit for tat going back and forth between these gangs. Lots of boys basically being killed, often they're black and Latino, etc. So some people would say, if cops are shooting young black men more, it's partly because young black men are involved with cops more often because they're committing more crime. And the other problem that MacDonald thinks is bigger, what's called black on black crime, when young black men kill other young black men typically, that too is driven by crime in black communities. So see how this links up to some of the other articles? There's many ways to link up. One would be to say, hey, Christoph, I found the cause of fear of young black men. Young black men commit more crimes. Crime is scary. Therefore, people are more scared of young black men than other groups of people. Right? However, another way to respond to this would be, okay, but how many young black men commit crimes? It's not the majority of them. Once more, I don't pretend to know the number off the top of my head, okay? Okay, it's not the majority of black men commit crimes. So that means if you're walking down the street and you see a black man, you shouldn't be scared. Even if statistics show that black men commit more crimes, the average black man's not ever going to do anything to you. So then this other response would say, even if blacks commit more crimes, still the fear that police officers show to a sort of generic young black man, even a generic young black man in a bad neighborhood, is still probably not a criminal. Trust me, I used to live in Philadelphia and I was in all sorts of bad neighborhoods that were filled with crime. I lived there for over 10 years. And I was only mugged once in my life. So in the shadiest neighborhoods, the dudes who looked the hardest and the meanest and the scariest, whether black or Asian or Latino or whatever, usually all they did is they mean mug you because they're trying to act tough. You'd want to act tough too if you lived in a crappy, crime-ridden neighborhood. You don't want to get messed with. And they'd look all tough and like they're going to stab you and not stab you, and you'd walk on your merry way. Right? So this is another possible response, is like, yes, there is crime in certain neighborhoods, more of it committed by black men than, say, Asian men. But we exaggerate that fear, and it's precisely the problem here is when innocent, that is non-criminal, black men are getting shot. So to say the crime of some is getting the non-crime of others punished by death, innocents punished by death for the crimes of others, that would still be a problem, a massive problem. Right. So you see, I hope you see already, I know you see actually. The problem is not, are there racists? That's an issue, right? But it's this whole complicated nexus of where do ideas about other people come from? What are the effects of other ideas about other people? How realistic are our ideas about other people? Are these ideas conscious or unconscious? Can we, if they're unconscious, can we merely reflect on more statistics and then change them? It's really difficult, right? It's really quite difficult. So, moving on to the next article now, which is titled, What It Felt Like to Be a Suspicious Black Teenager. Remember at the beginning of the recording I said, we want a variety of perspectives here. And remember, too, that I said, hey, it's not that there's a pro and a con or a people are racist and a people aren't racist camp, right? That it's infinitely more complicated than that. Part of why I included this third article is to give you a variety here that's not about just what's said, like which statistics are used, how are those statistics interpreted. If you noticed, hopefully, this third one is what's called first person. This is a man, a black man, he's a journalist for the Wall Street Journal, talking about his own personal experiences. So I hope this doesn't sound too, kumbaya, let's all hold hands, let's have a feeling circle. Because it's not. But I think part of the problem with race in America, and this would be a problem for lots of issues as well, is that we don't talk to other people. So think about your own life, whichever race you are. Are most of your friends your own race? And I don't know you, and I'm not in a classroom with you, so I can't see who would raise their hands if I asked the question, right? But stats show that in America, most people, almost all of their friends are of their same race. For white people, they're more likely to have a higher percentage of white friends if I didn't say that too confusingly, but basically, let's say if a white person has 10 friends and an Asian person has 10 friends, the white person is probably going to have 2 non-white friends. The Asian person is going to have 4, say, non-Asian friends. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, that all by itself doesn't mean that anybody's racist. There might be lots of reasons, and again, it depends on how we define racist. That old difficulty. But my point here is this, is that everybody in America segregates themselves on the basis of race. Yes, even if non-whites have more friends who aren't their same race, it's still, whether by choice or just where you grew up, that's not my point right now. Most of us hang out with people who racially are a lot like us. Some of us only really hang out with people who are racially like us, like almost exclusively. Now, once more, I'm not saying that that itself is bad. My point here is this. It is hard to understand the viewpoints and the feelings and the experiences of any other group, whether racial or age or political party, if you don't hear from them. And it's hard to hear from them in contemporary American life where our Facebook feeds sort out our favorite friends who we like all their, political views and we click like on it. Okay? It sorts them out so they come up to the top of your feed. I won't say who, but someone in my family didn't much like their political views, was getting a little annoyed when I go on Facebook and see their political views. So I did the, where you unfollow them. They can still see that you're friends, but you don't have to see any of their stuff in your feed anymore. But that precisely means I don't hear that person's views and experiences anymore. I did what I'm calling America in general right now. I'm calling America out for in general. Instead of listening to someone who I disagreed with, I said, I can't deal with that, and I shut it down. So this is part of what I hope this class does, and I hope you continue to do, because I know you do it, I know you keep an open mind, but continue to do even more after our class. Listen to people who aren't close to what you are. Listen to people who don't believe things close to what you believe. Even if they're wrong, even if they're biased and selfish and totally have the wrong facts, at least you gave them a chance, so you're a good person. And you might have learned something even from their mistakes. Right? You learn from your own mistakes, correct? Okay, it's probably just as easy to learn from someone else's errors or mistakes. And of course, they might have a lot to say that's not mistaken, and that would be even better. But I'm saying worst case, if they're totally wrong and messed up, you still benefit by listening to them some. And of course, most other people are not evil and stupid, so if you listen to them, they probably have quite a lot to offer. So this is why I offered this, this is why I put up this article here, okay, by Fields. It is literally an anecdote. Okay, anecdotes mean sort of one-off personal experiences that other people have had. And I keep seeing this saying lately that I really like. The plural of anecdote is not data. Meaning, if you hear an anecdote, even if you hear a bunch of them, that does not add up to proof or data for any position. But remember here, I'm not saying because this happened to Fields, if you believe Fields, this must happen to everyone all the time. What I'm saying here is, this is why I said I hope it doesn't sound too kumbaya and hand-holding, is that you have to open yourself up to how this individual, not black men in general, but how this individual, Gary, let's call him Gary now. Gary has seen some stuff in his life. I haven't seen that myself. It hasn't happened to me, and I haven't seen it happen to a black man. But it's something that happened to Gary. Multiple things actually happened to Gary. And he's never going to forget that stuff. And it affects the way he thinks about America. So even if it's an anecdote, and it happened to him, but it doesn't happen to a lot of people, at least to understand Gary, who's a human being like you and I are, to understand Gary I have to listen to what he said. Or I have to listen to what happened to him. Now, same thing, Gary's got to listen to me. Maybe I'll publish something like this one day, and Gary will have to listen to me to see where I'm coming from in my personal experiences. Okay? So this is part of what I want to show here, is that if we really listen to Gary, even if you don't think these things happen very often, even if you think that cops 99.9% of the time do a great job, even if you think that violence in black communities is driven by black crime, and so therefore not really, racism against blacks, but crime eating up communities, even if you believe all these things that would sort of minimize a little bit the issue of violence, police violence against young black men. Still, I think it's important to recognize the real frustration that lots of black men feel and lots of communities of color feel, because even if it's only an anecdote that happens occasionally, and even if it's that there is an actual black criminal on the loose, and that's what got Gary sort of caught up in this, you still have to understand how much that would pinch somebody's gut. You know what I mean? How much that would hurt, and the kind of shame and anger that would come along with being treated that way. Even if it only would have been once. So basically, empathy means more or less putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Even if Gary's exaggerating, even if this only happened to Gary, etc., let's put ourselves in his shoes and go, damn, if that happened to me, I would be so embarrassed. I would be so angry. I would be so worried the next time I saw another state trooper. I would feel X, Y, Z. I would feel all these different things. And Gary actually felt them. Now that, of course, doesn't define what racism is. It doesn't give us a solution to racism. It doesn't give us statistics about how often it happens. But I think that emotional connection to other people, as people who've actually seen and gone through some stuff, is an important part of life. I mean, I was going to say philosophy, but it's an important part of life. Okay, so we'll end this recording here, and then the last recording will be devoted to the Dyson article on Colin Kaepernick, and that'll be our last recording for these readings on race. Okay, thank you, everyone.